Hello, welcome to The Power of One. My name is Brian Berry and I'm your host. This program shows that one person can make a difference and that there are many people in our community who are doing so. Today, we are very fortunate to have Alan Edson, President of the Pasadena branch of the NAACP. Alan, thank you for being here today.
You're welcome. I'm happy to be here.
Great. I just wanted to start off and get to know you a little bit better and for the audience to understand who you are. So can you talk a little bit about what your upbringing was like and where you grew up?
Well, I grew up here in Pasadena. In my family, education was the thing that I had to do. That was how it was going to change, my plight and provide with me opportunities to, participate in America.
Yeah. So, what high school did you go to, and what was that experience like?
Well, I went to John Muir High School. It wasn't the best experience for me. My parents got divorced at that time, mm-hmm. and so it was tough for me, just kind of adjusting to that situation, and so I was a little disjointed, to say the least, in high school.
So a little bit unfocused, or
I kind of, my father was wanted to see me excel in school. Mm-hmm. So with him out of the house, I had an excuse not to.
Right. A little bit of freedom.
So I took advantage of that. And so, I was a late bloomer, to say the least. I really didn't find myself academically until I went to PCC.
Oh, good. What was the atmosphere like on the campus at Muir at that time?
Well, it was during the Black Power movement.
Oh.
So there was a lot of, I won't say militancy so much, but we had a BSU, mm-hmm. and we were trying to get better situation for the students at Muir. So we were loud and noisy, and tried to make things happen.
Yeah, a lot of people think that, especially with the Black Power movement, that it was sort of concentrated in Los Angeles or in Sacramento, and there were the protests that were there with some of the Black Power or the Black Panthers.
Yeah.
So first of all, how did it reach John Muir High School, and then how did it kind of show itself or manifest itself? How were you organized?
We had leadership. A lot of people probably know Taylor Morton. He was a former mm-hmm. president of the NAACP here in Pasadena. So he was one of the leaders, along with Louis Ledbetter. And I'm not sure how it formed, but we were all kind of had experienced a situation that happened in Watts in 1965. Mm. And so everybody wanted to find a way to express themselves in a black way. And so, it was the berets, the black leather jackets, and things of that nature that, the BSU was doing. Mm-hmm. As I recall, not really much was done, but, we had a forum mm-hmm. to talk about our concerns.
Yeah, so when we think about social justice and we think about change, especially political and economic change, what are your thoughts on some of the different ways of doing that? So whether it's protest or whether it's legislation or legal, what do you think? What do you think is effective?
Action, and however you come about
talk a little more about
doing that. In action. So, I cut my teeth in social justice in Oakland, California. Mm. Organization I was affiliated with, actually was the president of, the African American Development Association. We took on the cleanup of a contaminated park in East Oakland.
Really? About what year was this?
This was in 1991. Mm-hmm. This was right at the advent of the environmental justice movement.
Yeah, certainly there was a lot of activity going on.
So the thing was to organize. And so our first step in organizing was we sent out a letter to the surrounding community. We got 0 response. Then we were talking to some people that were also engaged in some activities in Oakland, and we bought a mailing list of people that lived in that community that had voted in 7 consecutive elections. So we had their names, addresses, and we went door to door. So from that effort, we created a following of 200 people plus, and that were also voters. So the city of Oakland and the council person that represented that district had to take notice. And through that exercise, it kind of put the taste of politics in my mouth. As I've grown, that's something I don't want to do anymore, but it showed me what was possible. And so in getting this cleanup happening, we also worked with large agencies. So the headquarters of the Environmental Protection Agency, Region 9, was in San Francisco. They came to our support because we believe that the cleanup that the city of Oakland had suggested and proposed was not sufficient for the community. And so the original deal was the city was going to spend $500,000 to clean up the park. They were going to remove 6 inches of soil around the entire park. Came to be, that the contamination was more extensive. So 5 years, $6.2 million later, the park was cleaned up. Not only the park was cleaned up, we also had 27 private homes that had lead contamination in their yards cleaned up. So it turned out to be a real positive for that neighborhood. The site wasn't listed as a Superfund site, but the cleanup was done with Superfund money.
Yeah.
And with access to that money, we were also able to bring in the Center for Disease Control, where they blood lead tested 641 students at an elementary school that was across the street from the park.
What were their findings?
There were many kids that had elevated blood lead levels,
Wow.
but not to a damaging level.
Yeah.
They found one student that did have elevated blood lead levels to where he was mentally disabled, and he was in the 3rd grade when it got tested, and he was just passed along because teachers didn't want to deal with him.
Right.
So he was finally able to get some help.
Yeah, it's a great story. And I would really agree with you that community organizing leads to that activism that you're talking about. So if you're able to bring people together, create a strategy, have a team approach, and then have goals and objectives, then you're much more effective at changing the social context in which you live. So are there any other examples of how you've used that in your life?
Yeah, for the, I guess, 25 years that I was involved in nonprofits, that's been kind of what has always been kind of the touchstone of my work. I also was the executive director of a neighborhood improvement project that was funded by the Hewlett Foundation. And
was that in Oakland as well?
It was in Oakland as well. Yeah. And we were, so the citizens of West Oakland, where this project took place, put together a plan that they wanted for their community. And it was my job to make that plan come to life. And one of the attributes of that project that, in hindsight, I really didn't like was that we were also a re-grantor.
So you would receive funding from the government, and then you had to pass it on?
So we had $500,000 every year
or from
that
the
Hewlett
foundation, from the foundation
gave
right.
us, and we re-granted it out to organizations that were doing work in West Oakland. A community-based organization should have nothing to do with spending money or putting money out in the streets to other organizations, because it becomes a popularity contest.
Yeah, well, you have to have a certain amount of criteria and then a process for them to go through. But
I mean, we had all that
yeah,
in place, but the folks with the loudest voices got the money.
yeah,
So probably the biggest thing that I was proud of was that we were able to establish a credit union in West Oakland out of that project.
Is it still operating?
Still operating. And, you know, kind of as a sidebar thing, West Oakland was a food desert.
Oh, yeah.
And my wife opened a cooperative grocery store in West Oakland that still exists.
So let's move back to the Pasadena area. There's a person I think who you're related to. Who was W.D. Edson, and what is he?
Well, W.D.
for?
Edson is my grandfather.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, his, you know, growing up, you know, the words I constantly heard were NAACP and NAACP this. And so, you know, his interest was really civic engagement.
Mm.
So he attended at that particular time, it was the city directors.
Right.
He attended every meeting. And when public forum came up, he had something to say. You know, he was very vocal and very active. And, you know, those attributes are kind of things that I inherited when I finally got the bug of social justice. I'm very happy to say that, you know, my granddad's legacy still lives on in Pasadena.
Absolutely.
And so it kind of also kind of, you know, scares me straight too, you know, because I have something to look up to, but also people have expectations of me, you know, based on his
legacy.
His legacy.
Did you ever go with him to city council or to you're right, the board of directors meeting?
At that particular time, I didn't go with him. You know, I only got coached by him and schooled by him, and you know, things that he wanted me to do, and things that my grandmother wanted me to do.
Yeah.
You know, and so, you know, as they say, behind every great man, there's this great woman.
Yeah.
And so, you know, she was really driving a lot of things.
Yeah, one of the reasons why I ask is there's a whole neighborhood that's named after him and a part of town. So I'm assuming that's the area where he lived, or?
Yes, yes. And so I got in touch with the W.D. Edson Neighborhood Improvement Association,
Yeah.
I think because of you. And, you know, the history that I had is that he came to Pasadena in 1930 and had a house built at Manzanita and Clinton. And that was in July of 1930. And my father was born in that house in October of 1930. I met Christina Budai, that has a collection of information about my family that I never knew about. So from her investigation, you know, Granddad came to Southern California in 1921 and worked as a longshoreman. So that was kind of history that I never had. But you know, he was on it, you know, and you can't get change unless you're involved. And that was kind of his point that he was always, you know, pushing. You know, at that time, you know, it was just noise in a way. But when I got to Oakland and had something to really work on, and you know, I kind of found, you know, what my niche was, and enjoyed it. You know, enjoyed, you know, change and what can happen if people are organized and together. You know, the expectation was that, you know, we wouldn't win. We wouldn't get anything that we wanted, but we got everything that we wanted and more.
And you mean around the park?
Around the park, but it also gave you my 15 minutes of fame. Because the environmental justice movement just really blew up in America with the signing of the executive order by Bill Clinton for environmental justice. And so, you know, I took my show on the road, so to speak. And so at every environmental protection agency conference that they had on environmental justice, you know, I spoke. But, you know, what made mine so powerful is that we won. You know, a lot
Right.
of people spend a lot of time fighting the good fight, but they really don't get what they want.
Yeah, there's a lot of frustration involved, and then the time and the energy that you exert, and then you don't see the results that you wanted. So thinking about our community where we live now, how are we doing on social justice? How would you say Pasadena is related to equity and inclusion and some of the other concepts of democratic access?
Well, I think just like every other area, equity, inclusion, and diversity are the buzzwords of the day. So everybody's trying to get involved with it. But what I learned in my work is that the voices of the people have to be heard. You know, they're the ones that are impacted by whatever the condition is in the locale.
Yeah.
And so we get talking heads speaking for people. And the people should be speaking for themselves. You know, and that's really the quality and trait that I like to see happen here in Pasadena.
But that's one of the toughest jobs, though, or one of the toughest challenges is how do we get, so people have their jobs, their families, their worries, their concerns. They have so many responsibilities in their lives that oftentimes they don't have enough time, like your grandfather, to go to city council and to make their voice heard, or they don't know how. So how do we, because I totally agree with you that oftentimes it's elected officials or leaders who do the talking. How do we get more people engaged? How do we get more people involved?
Just keep encouraging them to get involved. And just keep, you know, pounding it into them that it's their voices that we want to hear. And it's their voices that put the truth into whatever the issue is. You know, I can say, you know, lead poison is going to do X, Y, Z, but I'm going home at 5 o'clock. The people that live there, you know, really, you know, suffer the impacts of whatever the problems are. You know, be it police issues, education issues. You know, I can talk for days about what I see as deficiencies in the school system.
Mm-hmm.
But in the same breath, you know, my children went to private school. So, you know, that was my remedy for
Right.
a poor school system.
Right. But in that situation, you would say that the actual students who are in the school system now should be the ones who are advocating.
They should be advocating too. I mean, this civic engagement is the ingredient for changing conditions in any place. And so if people aren't speaking out, you know, the people that can correct the problem say that nobody wants us to do anything.
Right.
And so they don't do anything. Mm-hmm. And so the idea is to have a presence. Mm-hmm. And if you're present, you know, you can make things happen. And that's what I think government really wants to see in their people.
Well, you would hope. I mean, certainly
Yeah.
a democratic government, that's the aspiration, is that the residents or the people who
Mm-hmm.
live in that place are involved and engaged. But sometimes it doesn't always work that way. So let's talk for a couple of minutes specifically about the NAACP Pasadena branch. Mm-hmm. And so the first part of it is related to that process of civic engagement and of energizing people. What do you think the role of the NAACP is?
Well, the role is a powerful role, just because of our name and our brand and our history in America. Mm-hmm. We're the oldest civil rights organization in America. So we've been fighting this fight here in Pasadena since 1919.
100 years.
Yes.
Over 100 years.
Over 100 years. So, you know, again, for many years, from my observation, since I've been back in Pasadena, the profile of the NAACP has gone down in the community.
Why do you think that is? Or that
you know, it's always revolves around leadership.
Mm.
And so, you know, people thought that we're irrelevant. You know, we're an old school organization. You know, we weren't up with the times. just a lot of things. And so, my first thing was just to really kind of, elevate our profile again.
Mm-hmm. Visibility.
Yeah. So, that's happened. We're getting new members. People are even joining our branch, that had previously been members of the Pasadena branch. So, things are changing. But now that I've got a little following, we can kind of up the stakes a little bit.
Yeah, historically, what was one of the more significant issues that the NAACP dealt with here in Pasadena?
Probably one of the biggest was the desegregation of the Brookside pool. And I say that because, my parents were involved in that, or experienced that endeavor. And
they would have been impacted by it.
Yeah, so.
If they went to swim at the pool.
They had that day.
Right.
And it was funny, when I returned to Pasadena in 2012, I had just heard about this story. And so I was talking about it. So I was staying at the family house, and my mother was in the back, right? And we were talking about it, and we were talking about the day that, black people couldn't swim in the pool.
Yeah, what was it called?
Independence Day. It was
International
Day.
Right.
And so, so out of the back of the house, I hear this, Wednesday, because, my mother was very intimate with that experience. And so it was a big deal here in town. And so the NAACP sued the city of Pasadena, and I think after an 8-year period, a decision was made by the California Supreme Court, and we got access to the pool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a fascinating. I think a lot of people who live in Pasadena today, they go down to the Rose Bowl Aquatic Center and they see people coming and going, and they don't ever imagine that it was a landmark case to integrate a public swimming pool here, and that Pasadena was ground zero for that civil rights issue.
Yes.
So thinking about, I think one of the areas that's a challenge for any sort of civic engagement or activism is getting youth involved. So how is the NAACP Pasadena branch today working on getting young folks active and engaged?
The branch is struggling with that, as is every other organization in town and in America. Is how to get young people involved. So we have a young adult committee that is designed to attract more young people to the organization. And then we've also had a few events where we've raised money where we can underwrite the membership of young people. So, we're trying different tactics. Our event that we're going to have tomorrow, our general membership meeting, is going to be at the Mix, and just kind of having it off the turf.
Yeah.
Hopefully we'll bring some younger people there, and also some of their ideas. That's kind of one of the things that I've observed here in town, is that the elders are leading the way. And so we have this gap, of intellect, solving problems, and it, we need to kind of freshen things up with some new thoughts, and new ideas, and some new tactics.
Yeah. Related to that, is there one thing that you would change, or what one thing would you change about Pasadena's current culture?
Wow. Just for people to realize that they can go anywhere in this town. One of the things I'm involved in is the innovation, movement here in town.
And is that related to, say, startups and
it's
entrepreneurial?
Related to startups, entrepreneurism, but it's really just a manifestation of ideas, And so, most of the activity happens in Old Town. But folks that live in North Pasadena, there's like it's an invisible electric fence that runs across Lincoln or Fair Oaks at the freeway that people just won't cross.
Yeah.
And, you know, and so for young people, the reason is, well, they get profiled in Old Town. For a lot of other, you know, people, my peers, you know, they just don't feel comfortable. And so, you know, the city is open. And, you know, we just also have to have open minds too.
Right.
You know.
So you would hope for the city to be more inclusive and accepting and inviting to all members of the community.
The city isn't open and inviting.
Yeah.
You know, but people don't believe that for whatever reason. You know, just a lot of it is preconceived bias. And so it just doesn't happen. And, you know, I mean, I'm not special, but, you know, when I got to town, you know, I started, you know, moving around and checking things out and trying to find out where I might fit in. And it's open to anybody. But, you know, I had the curiosity to find out.
Right.
And so other people should, particularly from the black community, want to find out what's going on.
Yeah. As we kind of wrap up today, this has been a great conversation. Thank you for being here. What is one last thought that you'd like to leave with our viewers about the NAACP and the Pasadena branch?
You know, I guess the last thought is we got it. We have all the ingredients to lead the way in this community. And, you know, my job is to put that belief and faith in the people and make it happen. But the opportunities are here. We just got to identify them and go after them.
Yeah, that's your whole point earlier about leadership and having the right leader at the right moment. So I want to thank you so much for being on the show today, and I wish you the best of luck with the NAACP Pasadena branch and then also with all of your community work.
And so just as a corrective, Brian.
Oh, great.
We want to say NAACP, because if you look at the alphabet, there's not a double A.
Okay. Thank you for that correction. NAACP Pasadena branch.
Yes.
I'll look forward to working with you around the community.
Same here, Brian.
Thank you, Alan.
You're welcome.